Thanks for the question, Steve. And it's great to be able to see everybody in one shot and to see a lot of old and new friends this morning. Well, really the overarching issue for us right now is the pandemic, because systems are shutting down all across the country. And we're in this kind of tragic situation where right now students are flying home for Thanksgiving. My own students from Boston College are doing this, even though the Center for Disease Control says, please don't do this. There was an op-ed, the CDC guidelines are clear, is anyone listening? So we have a country with a lot of individualism in it. And I fear that this year is going to be very, very uneven, which will create huge issues in terms of equity in the system when students are returning to regular school, which at this point I think will be in September, August, September of 2021. So we have a new administration coming in and we have vaccines. So I think that right now there's a bit more hope than there has been for a while. For myself, a real major challenge for our system and for the future of our society is the ability of people to enjoy the art of democratic deliberation and debate, and to get good at listening to each other. And so if I could do something in every school, I would want every school to have debate teams. And it's okay to have spirited disagreements. It's actually the lifeblood of democracy. You have to be able to abide that. But we have to do something to kind of break down the polarization in our society, which also carries over to the schools. And I want to loop it to Pazi's critical comments about technology, because I'm now completing a report on 16 innovative schools in South Korea, in Seoul of South Korea. And we had a recommendation, we had a discussion, a webinar with our colleagues from the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education on Thursday of last week. And we noticed there wasn't really strong professional learning across the schools. Professional learning communities within school, but not across the schools. And one of the responses we got from one of the colleagues was, well, we do it informally. We use Kakao Talk, so they text to each other. Think about how hard it is to have a spirited disagreement where you're really listening to somebody deeply when you're texting, right? And so one of the things that's happening is that, as we all know, when you get together with friends and one person's sitting there texting for half of the conversation, texting is supplanting conversation in terms of kind of people interacting and hearing tone of voice, and somebody storms out of the room and then they come back in and there's all these hand gestures and it's an encounter, right? So one of the big issues I think for our schools, or there's many countries that are experiencing what they call democratic decline, where people have less confidence in democracy, is getting skilled at listening to each other, caring about each other, interacting, not just superficial listening, deep listening. Then if I could loop it back to the arch enemy of that, which is standardized testing, which is if you get everybody in the system stressed out about filling in the right bubble, you can't really do that deep listening. So technology is a threat, standardized testing is a threat, but there's also positive things. So, you know, the quote that you gave us, Pakti, I double checked from my Analects of Confucius right here. And it is the very first thing in the whole Analects. The master said to learn something and then to put it into practice at the right time. Is this not a joy? It's the first thing. So connecting, learning with some joy. And then I'll even promote Pazi's last book. You know, it doesn't mean, you know, like play can be hard. Sports is frustrating often, right? Andy and I hike on the Appalachian Trail. It depends on where you are, Pakti. If you're kind of north of Washington, D.C., it's Appalachian, and south, it's Appalachian, okay? So the people from the South would say that they say it right, but it's a separate issue. I think that the idea, you know, I love this. This was one quote from a Korean student that we got from our interviews. Group deliberation is hard. Group discussions are hard. The idea that kids are in small groups together, if it's an important topic, and if it's something they really care about, it should be hard, right? And so to experience that as part of education. So I'm worried about the future of American democracy. We got to get rid of the things in the system that undermine that. and then bringing back in some joy and the play and the excitement and the pleasure. Understanding, like with Pak's example, it's not always that fun. I've done some rock climbing. At points, it was terrifying, terrifying. I was shaking like a leaf. So it's the dynamic really of feeling alive and having school be a part of that experience.
Yeah, Steve, we are heading towards summer holidays, so it means that it's the end of the school year here. Probably one kind of a general notion from education world here is that teachers and principals are extremely tired. They are torn out by many things, and you probably know that situation here in Australia has been very different depending on where you are. In some of the states, some parts of the country, schools during the school year have only been closed for a few weeks. Here in New South Wales, we didn't have too long lockdown, but Victoria, for example, the children have been away from school most of the school year. But nevertheless, the teachers and principals are extremely torn out and tired. Here in New South Wales, that is the largest part of the country, the local teacher federation, the New South Wales Teacher Federation, run a kind of a formal inquiry on the teaching profession during this last 2 or 3 months. This is the first time since 2004 when the work of the teachers and principals, particularly teaching profession, has been looked at in a more detailed. I was one of the invited witnesses in that process, and that confirms the same issue, that the work of the teachers and principals have become extremely heavy in this country. On average, teachers work here in New South Wales 55 hours a week, of which about 11 hours at home and rest in the school, and principals working workload is even higher than that. So, this is one kind of overall the general notion here is that there's something has to happen. Now, at the same time, when this pandemic has really addressed the whole society and school system, many people are asking schools and teachers to do things differently or do more. And it's a very clear here, clearer than before, that teachers and schools cannot really expect it to do anything more before something else goes away from their workloads. And so this is the big debate now, that do we have a kind of a overloaded kind of education thinking here, that we are asking not only teachers and principals to work too much, but also the children having too many things in a school. The other interesting response by the many of the governments here, and I understand that there are many government colleagues joining this session, is that there has been quite a bit of concern by some organizations and governments, politicians as well, of the fact that some children have been lagging behind or left behind because of the school closures or lockdowns, or lack of connectivity or access to the technology that they are supposed to use with the schools. And many people have been asking governments to respond to this somehow. And now the common responses have now come from the two governments, namely Victoria about 3 weeks ago and New South Wales just a couple of days ago. Here in New South Wales, that is a state of about 10 million inhabitants. There are about 1.3 million children in the school system. The government decided to invest $340 million during the next the first half of next year on small group tutoring for schools, and mostly in mathematics and reading literacy in primary school. So it's a lot of money. It's about similar rate as in Canadian dollar. So it's a kind of a reflects this thinking also here in the policy circles, that the kind of a remedy for some of these problems brought by the pandemic can be fixed by giving children more of the similar type of stuff. It's a little bit like what Pak was talking about, teaching more of the same types of things, and this has happened without very little consultation of the teachers or the teaching profession. There's a very little consideration how this will be actually happening, whether this will mean more markets for private tutoring companies, or whether this would mean hiring more teachers to work in the schools. There's a very little consideration in the remote and rural parts of the country here. That where do they get these experts? Where do they find teachers teaching these small groups in mathematics and other things? So I think we are getting into summer holiday, well-deserved summer holidays here across the country with exhaustion, tiredness, and also a lot of questions that remain unanswered regarding how the Australian school system could change as a result of this disruption. And I think my personal view is that Australia will probably become one of the members of those examples globally that in the end have to conclude that even the dramatic change that the global pandemic has had on our lives in so many other ways, that even that type of disruption is not able to shake and challenge the old grammar of schooling here, that schools will continue to do what they have always done, and teachers will be asked to do what they have always done in the classrooms, and that the aftermath of this disruption will be much more trying to recover and return back to old normal, rather than at the system level, ask these big questions that what could we do differently. I hope that I'm wrong with this, but if you ask teachers and principals here, there are very little signs within the profession to say that something else would be in the horizon. So some good news and some challenges that it remains to be seen how this will play out, but we all need a holiday break.
Okay, so Singapore is always full of issues and challenges, but I think I'll just name one here. We as a system has always tried, especially in recent years, to encourage our students through education to be more creative, to be able to challenge norms, to be able to challenge established rules. Essentially, we are asking our students to be more creative, to develop more entrepreneurs. But at the same time, especially with COVID now, we are also needing to walk a very tight balancing game, because children also need to learn to obey rules. And if we educate them such that it is okay to just simply challenge rules, norms, be creative, be yourself, and do too much of that, then actually, and it is just in our culture, someone who, for his or her own convenience, but without the sense of the greater good, decide to flout our COVID-19 safety regulations and rules, endangers not just himself or herself, but endanger everybody. Therefore, there is this very fine line and this delicate balance that we must always maintain, that while on one hand, we need to help our next generation to be very creative people who will always be able to challenge norms. On the other hand, they also are people who obey rules and will be able to sacrifice individual benefits for the common good. And the main thing, therefore, is called discernment, to be able to tell the difference. And that is a tall order in our education system. But this is something that we need to do.
One thing here in Australia, this goes directly to the desks of the policymakers and authorities in this meeting, is that teachers are not necessarily tired, or principals, because of their work with the children. That's their core thing, and that's what's driving them to do these things. Here, the teachers and principal are mostly tired because of the bureaucracy and administration, the increasing paperwork and meetings about meetings, and sometimes meetings about meetings about meetings. So if you want to have a simple way to make sure that we have good leaders staying in the schools and teachers are more empowered and energized to do what they really need to do, I think the first question really needs to be, what is the absolute minimum amount of bureaucracy and administration that we're asking, particularly teachers, but also school principals to do in their schools every day? And you can change that if you want to by asking this question and making sure that we are not asking educators to spend their time on anything but working with the children and working with one another and for the school. It's a very clear notion here in Australia that the people in schools, that the educators are spending far too many hours every week and every day on the work that they think has very little or nothing to do with the teaching and learning with the kids. So let's try to reduce this admin bureaucracy part of the principals and teachers' work and give them more time to work with one another and the kids. And this would be already a big step forward.
Just based on Singapore's own experience, not that it is best practice, but I think it is very important for us to encourage our teachers and our school leaders. By encouragement, I mean positive signals. In many systems, I see that sometimes, the media, the social media, just give teachers and our school leaders a bashing. And I think that culturally, we need to help to reverse that. So one very practical way of doing this will be our own messaging. So merely as an example, for us, teachers are nation builders. They are. And the very fact that in Singapore, we came out of this, we are not through the pandemic yet, but now for 2 weeks now, we have 0 local infections. And it has not happened in school. And therefore, the minister and key people will come out not just to thank the doctors and the nurses. Yeah. Of course, we want to thank these people, but we thank the teachers as well, because the teachers are dealing with kids. And it's not easy to get young people not to mix about and to keep them safe. And we need to show all these appreciation to these people. And that includes a person like myself, a teacher educator. Through me, I carry a national message to thank teachers for what they are doing.
Just that kind of gratitude goes such a long way. And so it's a real cultural issue about how much we appreciate people in the profession. I mean, I am getting emails from old students of mine who are looking for exit strategies because they can't handle the pressure of working in the public school system anymore. And so this is a real dilemma. But I think it all starts with positivity, and probably also, I would love to have a kind of a whole national initiative around health. So one of the interesting things that Andy shared the book with me, The Power of Full Engagement, is that the opposite of full engagement of work is not always relaxing. It could be climbing a rock wall. Okay, so it's kind of not about being energetic, or it's not about engagement versus disengagement. It's different forms of engagement. And as a society in the US, I would just love to see a huge emphasis put upon physical fitness, physical well-being.
Great.
There's research that shows that that's better than going to 500 hours of therapy or, positive psychologists in your schools. Get kids just feeling so vibrant and alive in their bodies goes a long way. Again, Andy and I have a section on the new book on formative assessment, because you can't just say we're taking away standardized testing and we're not going to have any way of knowing whether kids are learning or not. And if I could, because we've done some technology bashing during this technologically mediated conversation, there are a number of very good tools now where kids can, show film clips of themselves at a school musical, on the debate team, managing an after-school activity, showing different kinds of work that can be captured through film or through writing or commenting. So in the US right now, a lot of systems are moving beyond standardized testing, even in college admissions, graduate school admissions. And there, I think technology can help to show what our young people can do in ways that probably will persuade parents more than a standardized test score.
Yeah, I think this is an important conversation. I would actually be careful in in kind of asking for less testing, I would ask smarter ways of assessing students. And this is a big conversation here right now, and people often understand these debates that you are either in favor of testing or you're against that, and that's not the point. The point is that how do we, like some people have been asking here, how do we assess excellence and equity and well-being and other things? We probably need more assessment, less standardized, high-stake, harmful standardized testing, and more really smart assessment for learning and well-being in the systems. So maybe we need to shift the conversation a little bit away from this either testing or no testing at all to asking questions. How do we, like some people have been asking here, how can we assess all these important things in a school without doing any harm for children and teachers and schools in the future?
So again, since I'm the only one person from a very different culture, and I'm definitely not from the Atlantic, therefore I'm allowed not to answer that question directly, but to do it in the other way around. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that this is a class. Okay, you're a class of school leaders in Singapore, and I'm teaching a lesson right now, and it's precisely about the question of testing and measuring all these things. And we challenge ourselves. It's quite subtle, but we challenge ourselves to think about such things. So one of the questions that we ask is, if I do love you and you do love me, do we actually need to keep testing one another to know that? Do we need to keep measuring in order to know that? So there's a difference between knowing and finding a number to claim that I know. So can we think about that? So I just get them to reflect.
I think what particularly Pasi has pointed out to us is just the way that not just during the pandemic, but before it, how rapidly and how dramatically our world is changing. And even 5 years ago, most of us would have been thinking a lot, mainly about literacy, numeracy, the economy, testing, standards, and STEM. And global economic skills. That's about 5 years ago where they all were. They're not inconsiderable because the news this morning in Canada, by the way, is that probably we're going to be one of the last rather than the first countries to get a vaccine rolled out. All kinds of countries are going to get a vaccine before us. Because we have zero pharmaceutical industry. We have an oil industry and natural resources industry in collapse in the middle of the country. And I've repeatedly spoken to people, we need to diversify our economy and develop the skills. So don't knock the issue about having economic skills. They are really important, and we're going to be later getting the vaccine because as a nation, we did not pay attention to that. However, we're also learning, because of what Pasi pointed out, that issues like mental health, equity, discrimination, these are big issues for our kids now, and we're beginning to think about this. And I think most countries here are now focusing on, for instance, how to change the curriculum. Many of you are in the midst of curriculum reform now. We weren't most countries about 5 years ago. So we're thinking about these broader goals, these broader outcomes. Scotland's been in that for a long time, but now thinking of a reset of curriculum for excellence. But be careful that even with curriculum and even with well-being, the arch enemy of standardization and testing does not take those things and in a way kind of destroy them with their own unique capacity. So Curriculum for Excellence in Scotland has 4 fantastic capacities. And then, as we found in the OECD review, not with Beatrice, but with some of Beatrice's colleagues, that then turned into hundreds of experiences and outcomes and a 300-page booklet that people had to go through to know how to deliver those outcomes in detail. Engagement. Some systems have got onto this by assailing their schools with engagement survey after so the kids are so busy filling out engagement surveys, they've not actually got any time to get engaged. Bureaucracies can take the best ideas and utterly eviscerate them of all the spirit that they were intended to have in the first place. So we really need to be careful about this. What does this mean for how we operate as systems? Well, first of all, model the kind of leaders we want our principals and our teachers and our kids to be. So the system should probably be stronger on vision, be stronger on passion, be stronger on resources and support, and have ministers and deputy ministers who exude and exhibit repeatedly that passion. And all of you around here exhibit that, and some of you ministers do, but not all of them. And if they don't, talk to your prime minister or president or premier or whoever it is and say, look, folks, we need a different kind of minister here who's going to represent what it is that we're actually trying to get amongst our young people. And then secondly, I think, as we had in this last part of the discussion, is the essence of power is to give it away. So if you're going to decentralize, if you want more collaboration, don't make it a project, don't look for extra resources, don't make it an initiative, but actually reallocate resources from central government to regions and to schools with incentives to collaborate together. Actually give some of your own money away so that teachers, communities, districts, regions can have more power closer to the kids to collaborate with the kids to bring about this new vision that will respond to the crisis of mental health, of climate change, of discrimination, and of equity that our people have talked about. And to pick up Pat T's metaphor as we close, and I am a hiker and a kind of climber, and I have broken my ankle, so I know all the things that Paz is talking about. And Dennis and I have climbed vertically up the Dolomites with nothing but 2,000 feet of empty space beneath us. It's a metaphor also for equity and success. That success and equity is not a ladder, but there are multiple pathways to the top. But also, Pakti, some people don't like climbing. They like sailing or canoeing or just solving math problems. So we need not only to give people different ways to climb, we need to give people different ways to engage at the same time. Thank you for these three incredible panelists that we've had today. In the US, enjoy Thanksgiving, and the rest of you enjoy whatever you have at the moment. But thanks to all of you.